Welcome to new Neo Storybook channel. Warning! Your English skills are at risk. Urgent lessons await. In the bustling city of Oakbridge, where the skyline was a mix of towering skyscrapers and old historical buildings, lived a young man named Samir. Oakbridge was known for being a hub of global commerce, where businesses from all over the world converged, and English was the common language that tied everyone together. However, Samir faced a growing fear. Despite living in such a vibrant and English-speaking city, his English skills were at high risk. Samir had always been a hardworking and determined individual, but he had a secret. While he excelled in his job as a junior technician, he struggled with his English. He could barely hold conversations without stammering, and writing professional emails was his worst nightmare. His poor English skills were like a silent weight dragging him down, especially when he compared himself to his colleagues who spoke fluently and confidently. Samir knew deep down that English wasn't just a subject in school or a tool for conversation, it was the key to success in Oakbridge. And the more he neglected his English skills, the more opportunities slipped through his fingers. His world was closing in, and he couldn't shake the feeling that his career, and perhaps his future, was at serious risk. One day, an incident occurred that made him realize just how urgent the situation had become. At work, Samir was asked to lead a presentation for an important international client. His heart sank when he received the email from his manager, as he knew that a flawless presentation in English was expected. He had no choice but to accept. But the very thought of speaking in front of fluent English speakers filled him with dread. Chapter 1: The Presentation Disaster. The day of the presentation arrived. Samir stood in front of his colleagues and the client representatives, his palms sweating, his heart racing. As he began to speak, the nerves took over. His sentences were broken, his pronunciation faltered, and he couldn't find the right words to express his ideas clearly. The eyes of his audience were filled with confusion, and some were even checking their watches, silently hoping for the presentation to end. When it finally did, Samir felt like he had just survived a nightmare. But the worst part came later when his manager called him into the office. "Samir," his manager said, his voice serious, "I know you're a talented technician, but your communication today put our entire project at risk." The client was disappointed. "We can't afford miscommunication on such important deals. I need you to work on your English skills urgently, or we might have to reconsider your role on this team." Those words hit Samir like a ton of bricks. He left the office that day feeling embarrassed and defeated. His English skills weren't just affecting his work, they were putting his entire career in jeopardy. Chapter 2: Realization of the Urgency. That evening, Samir sat in his small apartment, reflecting on what had happened. He thought about how many times he had ignored his English struggles, brushing them off as unimportant. He had always assumed that technical skills were enough to succeed, but now, it was clear that communication, especially in English, was just as critical, if not more so. Samir turned on his laptop and began researching the importance of English in the professional world. He was stunned by what he found. Studies showed that people with strong English communication skills were 34% more likely to get promotions. Fluent English speakers had access to better paying jobs, more networking opportunities, and a global career. But those who struggled with English? They often found themselves stuck in lower-level positions, unable to climb the corporate ladder. He came across a line that struck him deeply: if your English skills are poor, your career is at risk. Samir felt a knot form in his stomach. He had been underestimating the importance of English all along. He realized that his inability to speak and write fluently in English wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a serious problem that could ruin his career if he didn't take immediate action. It was an urgent wake-up call. Samir needed to learn English not just for his job, but for his future. Chapter 3: The Power of Urgent Lessons. Determined to turn things around, Samir made a commitment that night: he would dedicate himself to mastering English. But he also knew he needed help. He searched online for urgent English lessons that focused on real-life communication, rather than just grammar and vocabulary drills. That's when he found a language mentor named Rebecca, who specialized in helping professionals improve their English fluency through practical, high-pressure lessons. Rebecca's program was designed for people like Samir, those who needed to learn fast, because their careers depended on it. Samir signed up immediately, knowing this was his last chance to save his career. When he met Rebecca, she didn't waste any time. "Samir," she said, "you're not just learning English for the sake of learning it. You're learning to communicate your ideas effectively, to express yourself clearly, and to show confidence. In the business world, communication is everything. If you can't communicate well, your ideas won't matter, no matter how brilliant they are." Rebecca's words hit Samir hard. He realized that he had been so focused on the technical aspects of his job that he had forgotten the most important skill of all: communication. The first lesson Rebecca gave him was simple but profound: communication is about connection, not perfection. Chapter 4: The Struggles of Mastery. The lessons weren't easy. Rebecca pushed Samir out of his comfort zone, making him practice speaking in front of mirrors, recording himself reading professional emails, and even engaging in mock presentations with her. She focused on real-life situations: how to introduce himself confidently in meetings, how to explain his technical ideas in clear and simple terms, and how to navigate difficult conversations. Samir struggled at first. His old habits of hesitation and doubt were hard to break. There were times when he wanted to give up, feeling that the progress was too slow, and the work too hard. But Rebecca kept reminding him of the urgency. "If you want to save your career, Samir, you have to push through this discomfort. Fluency doesn't come from doing what's easy. It comes from facing your fears head-on." Slowly, but surely, Samir began to see changes. He started speaking more naturally, forming sentences without overthinking every word. His pronunciation improved, and he found that he was able to express himself with more clarity and confidence. For the first time in a long while, Samir felt hopeful. He was still far from perfect, but he was making real progress. He knew that fluency wasn't a destination, it was a continuous journey of growth. Chapter 5: The High Stakes of English Skills. During one of their lessons, Rebecca sat Samir down for a serious talk. "Samir, you're doing great," she said, "but you need to understand something. In today's world, English isn't just a skill, it's a necessity. People judge your competence by how well you communicate. If you're poor in English, it sends a message that you're not capable, even if that's not true. And that's a message you can't afford to send." Samir nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. He thought back to his presentation disaster and how his poor English had led the client to doubt his abilities. "Here's the truth," Rebecca continued. "If you want to succeed, whether it's in business, technology, or any global field, you need to master the art of communication. And English is the language of global business. You don't have the luxury of being poor in it. Every conversation, every email, every presentation, those are your opportunities to show your value. If your English is weak, those opportunities vanish." Samir sat in silence, absorbing her words. He had never thought about it that way before, but it made perfect sense. Poor English wasn't just a personal struggle, it was a professional liability. Rebecca looked him in the eyes. "You've come a long way, Samir. But you need to keep going. Your career, your success, it all depends on your ability to communicate with confidence." Chapter 6: The Biggest Life Lesson. As the weeks turned into months, Samir's English skills transformed. He was no longer the hesitant, unsure speaker he once was. His colleagues noticed the change. He was more confident in meetings, clearer in his emails, and more engaged in discussions. But more than anything, Samir noticed the change within himself. He felt empowered. He realized that mastering English wasn't just about learning a language, it was about gaining control of his future. One day, his manager called him into the office again. This time, the conversation was different. "Samir," his manager began, "I've noticed a huge improvement in your communication skills. I wanted to let you know that the clients have been impressed with your recent work, and we'd like to offer you a promotion." Samir felt a wave of relief and pride wash over him. He had done it. He had saved his career, and he had done it by mastering the one skill that had been holding him back for so long. As he walked out of the office that day, Samir reflected on the journey he had been through. The biggest life lesson he had learned wasn't just about English, it was about the power of persistence, the importance of communication, and the urgency of facing your weaknesses head-on. He realized that English skills were at risk for anyone who neglected them, and the consequences were too great to ignore. But with hard work, the right guidance, and a sense of urgency, anyone could turn things around. Moral of the story: your English skills are more than just a tool for conversation, they are the foundation of your professional success. If your English is poor, your opportunities are at risk. But with dedication, urgency, and the willingness to embrace the challenge, you can unlock the doors to a brighter future. Communication is the key to success, and mastering it is the most important lesson of